The wind was sharp that night. Cold dust moved across the broken ground, carrying the smell of metal and old fire. John, a lone human traveler, walked slowly through the ruins of an abandoned alien village. His boots pressed against shattered stones. The moonlight made the place look ghostly. He had been walking for hours searching for shelter when he heard something strange. It was not the sound of the wind. It was softer, weaker, like a whimper. A child's cry. John stopped. His heart raced. On a dead world like this, who could still be alive? He moved carefully, his hand near the weapon on his belt. He followed the sound into a half-collapsed building. Inside, the air was damp and smelled of ashes. The cry came again, clearer this time, and his eyes caught movement in the corner. There she was. An alien woman sat on the ground, her body thin, her skin pale blue with faint glowing lines. Her eyes were wide and tired, but still sharp. Wrapped against her chest was a small child, no older than a few months, crying weakly. The shocking thing was not the child, but the mother herself. She had no arms. Her shoulders ended where arms should have been. She held the baby only with the help of cloth tied around her body. Her legs shifted nervously as she tried to comfort the crying infant. When she noticed John, she froze. Fear flashed in her eyes. Then slowly she whispered with a trembling voice, "You, human?" John lowered his weapon, showing he meant no harm. "Yes," he said softly. "I'm human." I heard the child. The woman's lips shook. Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, help me." John stepped closer. He saw the baby's thin face, hungry and cold. The child's small hands reached out into the air, searching for something that wasn't there. The woman tried to rock the baby with her body, but it was clear she was struggling. Finally, she looked up at John with desperation. "I have no arms, human. I cannot care for my daughter," she said, her voice breaking. "Help me, please. Be my husband." John's chest tightened. The words struck him like thunder. He had expected begging, maybe food or water, but not this. "Husband?" He stared at her, trying to understand. The woman lowered her head in shame. "Without a husband, my people said I was worthless. Without arms, they said I should not even live." "But my daughter—" She looked at the baby, her eyes full of love. "She deserves life. I cannot protect her alone. If you will not take us, we will both die." For a moment, John could not answer. He looked around at the ruins, at the broken walls and burned homes. This place was empty, silent, dangerous. No one else was coming. The baby cried again, louder this time, and the sound echoed through the ruins like a cry for mercy. John knelt beside the woman. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small piece of ration bread. Gently, he broke it apart and offered it. The woman looked shocked. Her lips trembled, and she carefully leaned forward to feed her child with the small crumbs. The baby quieted, tiny mouth moving, eyes closing slowly. The woman let out a sob, relief flooding her face. You are kind," she whispered. "But kindness is not enough. My people will come. If they find me, they will kill the child. They will say she is cursed because of me." John frowned. "Why?" "Because I am broken," she said. Her voice shook like fragile glass. "Born without arms. No man wanted me. They gave me to war, to be used and left behind. The father of my child is gone. They will not allow her to live. Please, human." Her eyes locked with his. "Take me as your wife. Take her as your daughter. Only then will they not touch us." John's throat felt dry. He had fought in battles before. He had seen suffering. But this was different. This was not war, this was survival. A woman, helpless in body but fierce in spirit, begging for protection. The wind outside howled through the broken walls, carrying distant sounds. John thought he heard movement far away, voices maybe, or footsteps. The woman's body tensed. She heard it too. "They are searching," she whispered. "We must hide. Please answer me, human. Will you protect us?" John looked at the baby, who now slept quietly in her mother's fragile hold. He looked at the woman, her face a mix of fear and hope. And he realized this was not just about her arms or her words. This was about life itself. For a moment, silence filled the broken house. Then John spoke. "I will protect you." The woman gasped, her eyes wide, shining with tears. "Then you are my husband," she whispered, almost in disbelief. John tightened his grip on his weapon. The sound outside grew clearer. Whoever was coming was getting closer. He looked at the fragile family before him and felt the weight of responsibility fall on his shoulders. The encounter had changed everything. And in that moment, he knew. This was only the beginning. The struggle the night dragged on like a heavy shadow. John had promised to protect the alien woman and her baby, but promises were easier spoken than carried out. He sat against the cracked wall of the ruined shelter, listening to every sound outside. The wind whistled through broken beams. The faint cry of a distant creature echoed. But what chilled him most was the memory of those footsteps in the dark. Someone was near. The woman sat only a few feet away, her baby sleeping in the cloth sling tied across her chest. Her eyes never left John. She studied him with silent intensity, as if trying to decide whether he was truly her savior or just another passing shadow that would leave her behind. "You should sleep," John whispered. Trying to ease the tension, she shook her head. "I cannot. If I close my eyes, I see them. The faces of my tribe, the ones who told me I was unworthy." Her voice was bitter yet fragile. John didn't answer. He could see her pain clearly. She was exhausted, but her willpower kept her awake. After a long silence, she finally asked, "Why did you help me, human?" You could have walked away, John thought for a moment. He wasn't sure himself. Maybe it was the baby's weak cry that had struck something deep inside him. Maybe it was the desperation in her eyes. Or maybe after years of fighting wars and wandering alone, he was tired of walking away. "Because no one should be left like this," he said simply. Her lips trembled. She lowered her gaze as if his words carried more weight than she expected. The baby stirred suddenly, letting out a faint whimper. The woman bent forward, trying to rock her daughter with her body. She whispered soothing sounds, pressing her cheek against the child's head. But without arms, even the simple act of comforting was a painful struggle. She tried to shift her legs, but the cloth tangled. The baby cried louder and panic filled her eyes. John leaned forward quickly. "Here, let me help." He reached out, carefully adjusting the sling. He supported the baby in his arms, rocking her gently. The child's small fingers wrapped around his thumb, gripping with surprising strength for something so tiny. Slowly, the cries softened into quiet breathing. The woman watched in silence. Tears formed in her eyes again, but this time they were not only of sorrow. "She listens to you," she whispered. "She trusts you already." John handed the baby back to her, careful to make sure the cloth was tight. "She needs you more than anyone," he said softly. The woman shook her head. "No, she needs more than me. She needs what I cannot give. That is why I asked you to be my husband. Not because of love, but because of survival." Her honesty struck John like a blade. She wasn't trying to trick him. She wasn't asking for romance or comfort. She was asking for life, for her daughter. Before John could respond, a sharp sound came from outside. A crack of stone, footsteps. The woman's body stiffened. Her eyes widened in fear. "They are here." John grabbed his weapon and stood quickly, moving toward the doorway. In the darkness, he saw faint lights, glowing torches or scanners, moving through the ruins. Shadows of tall figures shifted across the broken walls. "Stay quiet," John whispered, his voice tense. The woman held her breath, pressing her body tightly around the baby. The child stirred but did not cry, as if sensing the danger. The lights drew closer. John could hear the guttural voices of the aliens outside. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Searching, hunting. He crouched low, every muscle tense. He knew he couldn't fight them all. If they found the woman, she would be killed instantly. If they found the baby, its cries would be silenced forever. Minutes dragged by like hours. The searchers moved past the shelter, their light sweeping across the walls. For one terrifying moment, the glow touched the doorway where John crouched. He held his breath, praying they wouldn't look deeper inside. Finally, the voices faded. The lights moved farther away. The sound of footsteps grew softer until there was only the wind again. John exhaled slowly, lowering his weapon. He turned back to see the woman shaking, tears rolling silently down her face. She had not moved the entire time, too afraid even to breathe. "They will come again," she whispered. "They will not stop until they find me." John knelt beside her. "Then we won't be here when they return." She looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear and hope.
"You mean—"
"You will take us with you?" John hesitated. He had lived alone for years, carrying no one's burden but his own. Taking them meant danger, risk, responsibility. But when he looked at the sleeping baby, he felt a strange pull in his chest. A pull he could not ignore. "Yes," he said firmly. "We'll move at dawn. The woman gasped softly. For the first time, a faint smile appeared on her lips. Then, maybe my daughter has a chance. John nodded, though deep inside he knew the struggle was only beginning. The world outside was harsh, filled with enemies. Protecting them would not be easy. But as he sat down again, weapon in hand, he realized something important. He was no longer just a wanderer. He was no longer walking alone. He was now a protector, a guardian, and perhaps, as strange as it sounded, a husband to someone who had nothing left. The night grew colder and danger still lurked in the shadows. But the bond between them, fragile yet powerful, had begun to grow. And with that bond came a promise. Whatever struggles awaited them, they would face them together. The hidden past. The morning sun broke through the gray clouds, casting pale light across the ruins. John stood near the broken doorway, scanning the horizon. The alien patrols had passed in the night, but danger still lingered. He had promised the woman they would leave at dawn. Now, with the baby strapped against her chest, they were ready to move. The woman walked slowly, her steps careful. Without arms, every movement was a struggle, but she carried herself with surprising strength. John stayed close, helping when the path grew uneven. Hours passed in silence. The land stretched empty around them, burned fields, broken towers, the skeletons of a once thriving city. The baby slept most of the way, her small breaths the only sound besides the wind. Finally, when they stopped to rest beneath the remains of a fallen pillar, John broke the silence. "You never told me your name," he said. The woman hesitated. She looked down at the baby, then back at him. "My people called me Sira," she whispered. "It means without gift, a name for the useless." John frowned. "That's not a name. That's an insult." Her eyes filled with pain, but also defiance. "It was all they gave me. I was born without arms. From the moment I opened my eyes, they decided I was a burden. My own mother cried when she saw me. My father turned his face away. To them, I was a shame to the family." She paused, her voice trembling. "So they gave me to the priests. They said I could serve in war since I was unfit for family. The priest told me I had only one value, to be given to men who did not want wives but wanted use." John clenched his fists. He could hear the bitterness in her tone, the raw memory of humiliation. Sira continued, her gaze far away. "That is how I met the father of my daughter. He was a soldier. He did not love me. He did not stay. When he died, I thought perhaps they would allow me to raise the child. But when they saw her, they declared her cursed, born from a broken mother. They said she must die." Her body shook as she pulled the baby closer with her legs. "I refused. I ran. I hid in these ruins. I have been running ever since." John's chest tightened. He had seen cruelty in many forms, wars, betrayals, greed. But this was different. This was a cruelty written into law, into culture, into the hearts of an entire people. He looked at Sira, sitting there without arms, cradling her baby with her body. She had been abandoned, abused, hunted, yet she was still here, still fighting. "You're stronger than any of them," John said firmly. "They couldn't break you." Sira's eyes met his. For a moment they softened. A faint spark of something, hope maybe, flickered within them. But the moment didn't last. The baby began to cry again, hungry. Sira tried to rock her, whispering soothing words, but it wasn't enough. The baby's cries grew louder, echoing through the ruins. John quickly opened his pack. He had only a few rations left. He soaked a piece of dried bread in water and carefully fed the child, who calmed after a few minutes. Sira watched silently. When the baby finally slept again, she whispered, You know how to care for her better than I do." John shook his head. "No, you're her mother. She needs you." Sira's lips trembled. "But I cannot hold her like you can. I cannot protect her. Every day I fear she will slip from my grasp. Every night I fear her cries will bring death upon us. That is why I begged you to be my husband. Not for me, but for her." John didn't answer right away. He stared at the horizon, where smoke rose faintly in the distance. Patrols, perhaps, or villages burning. He knew she was right. Alone, she wouldn't survive long. The child wouldn't survive at all, but something inside him stirred as he listened to her. It wasn't only duty that kept him here, it was something deeper. "We'll keep moving," John said at last. "If we reach human territory, no one will hurt you or your daughter." Sira's eyes widened. "Human territory? You would take me there?" "Yes," John replied. You'll be safe there, her breath caught. Safe and accepted? John hesitated. He thought of his own people. Would they accept her? Would they welcome a woman with no arms and her alien child? He wasn't sure. But looking into her desperate eyes, he knew he had to try. Yes, he said firmly. I'll make sure of it. For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Sira whispered almost to herself, Perhaps the gods have not abandoned me after all. The baby stirred, letting out a soft sigh. Sira bent her head, pressing her cheek against the child. Her eyes closed, and for the first time she looked at peace. But John kept his eyes on the smoke in the distance. The past they had just spoken of was full of cruelty. The present was full of danger. And the future would test them both. Still, as he watched the fragile family resting beside him, he knew one thing for certain. He would not let their story end in sorrow. Not if he could help it. The first threat. The ruins stretched endlessly, silent under the dull sky. John and Sira moved carefully through broken streets, her baby tied close to her chest. The smoke John had seen earlier grew thicker now, and the smell of burning metal drifted in the air. He knew they weren't alone anymore. By midday, they found a hollow under a collapsed tower. It wasn't much, but it gave shade and a small place to rest. Sira leaned against the stone, rocking the baby gently with her body. John crouched near the entrance, his weapon ready, his ears sharp for any sound. The silence broke suddenly. A crack echoed in the distance, sharp and unnatural. Then came voices, rough, guttural, speaking in a language John didn't fully understand but recognized. Raiders. Sira's body went rigid. Her eyes filled with fear. They are close, she whispered. If they find us, John raised a hand. Quiet. Stay with the baby. He peered out through a gap in the rubble. Figures moved across the ruined street. 4 of them, tall, armored in scraps, carrying blades and spears that shimmered faintly in the light. Raiders, scavengers, hunters of the weak. They stopped near the tower. One of them sniffed the air, tilting his head. Another kicked at the stones, laughing cruelly. They were searching. John's grip on his weapon tightened. If they entered the hollow, there would be no escape. The baby stirred, letting out a soft whimper. Sira froze, pressing her cheek against her child, praying the sound would stop. But babies don't understand danger. Another whimper rose, louder this time. One raider snapped his head toward the sound. He barked something to the others, and they began moving closer. John cursed under his breath. He couldn't wait any longer. He slid from the hollow and moved fast, using the shadows of broken walls. His heart pounded. If he failed, Sira and the baby were finished. The raiders advanced, their weapons raised. John took aim and fired. The first shot struck one square in the chest, dropping him instantly. The others shouted, spreading out. Steel clashed against stone as one raider swung his blade at John. He ducked, rolling aside, and fired again. Another fell. But the last 2 closed in quickly, their speed terrifying. One lunged with a spear. John blocked with his arm, the blade grazing his shoulder. Pain shot through him, but he gritted his teeth and shoved the raider back with all his strength. The second raider roared, swinging a heavy axe. John barely dodged, the weapon smashing into the wall behind him. Dust and stone rained down. From the hollow, Sira cried out, "John!" Her voice trembled with fear, but also desperate faith. The baby began wailing, the sound echoing across the ruins. The raider's eyes lit with cruel hunger at the sound. John knew he couldn't let them near. Summoning every ounce of strength, he swung his weapon like a club, striking the axe wielder in the jaw. The raider stumbled. John fired point-blank, ending him. The last raider snarled, charging forward. John was out of breath, his arm bleeding. His weapon clicked. Empty. The raider raised his spear, eyes glowing with savage triumph. Then, a sound broke through, the sharp crack of falling stone. Sira, with no arms, had thrown her whole body against the loose wall of the hollow. The stones collapsed onto the raider's back, staggering him for a moment. It was enough. John rushed forward, seizing a shard of broken metal from the ground and drove it into the raider's chest. The alien gurgled, stumbled, and collapsed. Silence returned. John stood there, chest heaving, sweat and blood on his skin. Around him lay the bodies of the raiders. The air smelled of iron and ash. He turned back to the hollow. Sira sat against the wall, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The baby pressed tight against her. Tears streaked her face, but her eyes shone with relief. "You fought them," she whispered. "You saved us." John shook his head, wincing at his wounded shoulder. No, you saved me. If you hadn't pushed that wall... Sierra lowered her gaze, whispering softly, even without arms, I can still fight for her. John stared at her in awe. She was fragile, yes, but there was strength inside her that defied everything her people had said. She was more than broken. She was unbreakable. The baby quieted slowly, as if sensing the danger had passed. Sierra bent her head, pressing her lips against her daughter's forehead. John reloaded his weapon, his hands trembling slightly. He looked at the bodies outside and knew this was only the beginning. Where there were raiders, more would follow. The sound of battle would travel. He stepped back into the hollow, his voice firm. We can't stay here. Not after this. We move now, Sierra nodded. Her eyes were still wet, but her voice carried new strength. Then I will follow you, husband. John froze at the word. Husband. He had not answered her plea before, not fully. But after today, he realized she wasn't asking for tradition or ceremony. She was asking for survival, for trust, for someone who would not abandon her. He looked at the baby, then at Sierra. And in his silence, in the way he stood before them with weapon ready, he gave his answer. The first threat had come and passed. But many more waited ahead, and John knew now this was no longer just a promise. It was a bond he could not walk away from. The growing bond, the ruins were far behind them now. For 2 days, John and Sierra traveled across barren plains, sleeping in broken caves and under the hollow shells of dead trees. The baby never left Sierra's chest, wrapped in cloth, her small breaths a constant reminder that life still clung to them. John walked ahead, always scanning the horizon, always ready with his weapon. His wounded shoulder still ached from the raider's spear, but he forced himself to move forward. Danger could appear at any time. He could not afford weakness. Sierra followed behind, her steps slow but steady. Though she had no arms, she balanced the child carefully, shifting her weight when the ground grew rough. Her eyes often lifted to John's back, watching him as if he carried not only their safety but her trust. By evening, they found shelter in a half-collapsed watchtower. The wall still stood high enough to block the wind. John gathered what little firewood he could and lit a small flame. The warm glow filled the dark space. Sierra sat near the fire, the baby curled against her. For a long time she said nothing, only watching the flames dance. Finally she spoke softly. You fight for us, as if you have always belonged to us. John looked at her, surprised by her words. I fight because I promised. Sierra shook her head. No, a promise is only words. You fight with your life. That is more than a promise. That is choice. Her voice was calm, but her eyes glistened. She lowered them to her daughter. In my world, no man ever chose me. Not once. I was only given like an object. But you choose. John didn't know how to answer. He had lived his life moving from one battlefield to another, never staying long enough to choose anything. Yet now here he was, choosing to stay, to fight, to carry 2 lives on his shoulders. The baby stirred, letting out a faint cry. Sierra shifted, trying to comfort her with gentle movements of her body, but the cloth slipped and the baby nearly tumbled. Sierra gasped, panic flashing in her eyes. She bent forward desperately, her legs twisting to catch her daughter, but she struggled. John moved quickly. He caught the child in his arms, holding her against his chest. The baby quieted almost instantly, her tiny fingers curling into his shirt. Sierra's breath shook. Tears welled in her eyes. You see? She whispered. Even this, I cannot do. I cannot hold her. John sat beside her, the baby safe in his arms. He looked at Sierra firmly. You do hold her. Not with hands, but with everything else. With your voice, your warmth, your love. That is more than enough. Her lips trembled. She blinked hard, fighting back tears. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Then John did something unexpected. He gently placed the baby back into Sierra's sling, but he stayed close. He showed her how to lean, how to use her legs and body to tighten the cloth so it wouldn't slip again. Step by step, he guided her until the child was secure. Sierra looked at him in awe. You teach me how to be a mother. John shook his head. You already are one. I'm only showing you what you already know. Her eyes softened, and for the first time since they met, she smiled. It was faint, uncertain, but real. The firelight reflected in her pale skin, making the glowing lines across her body shimmer faintly. John noticed them now, patterns like stars across her skin. They were beautiful, though she had spoken of them before as marks of shame. That night after the baby slept, Sierra whispered again, "When I asked you to be my husband, I did not think you would stay. I thought you would pity me, then leave. But you stay." John stared into the fire. "Because leaving would mean death for you both. And He paused, searching for the right words. "I don't want that on my conscience." Sierra tilted her head, studying him. "No," she said softly. "Not conscience, heart." Her words struck him. He looked at her, and for a moment he saw not a broken woman but someone who had endured everything yet still carried hope in her eyes. The night deepened. Outside the wind howled, but inside the tower, the fire burned steady. Sierra leaned her head against the wall, the baby resting quietly against her chest. Her eyes closed slowly, her breathing calming. John stayed awake, guarding them, but his gaze often drifted toward her. The bond between them had grown silently, like roots beneath the soil. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was something stronger. By dawn, when the fire burned low, John realized something he had not wanted to admit. He wasn't protecting them only because of a promise. He was protecting them because they had become his family. The Great Escape? The morning sky was heavy with clouds, the air tense with the smell of smoke. John knew they could not linger any longer. The raider attack had left signs, and more would come searching. The world around them was closing in, and if they didn't move soon, Sierra and her baby would not survive another night. John tightened the straps of his pack and checked his weapon. His shoulder still throbbed, but there was no time for rest. He turned to Sierra, who was adjusting the sling that held her child. Despite her missing arms, she stood tall, determination burning in her pale eyes. "We head east," John said firmly. "There's an old riverbed. If we follow it, it may lead us closer to human territory." Sierra nodded. "Then let us not waste the day." They set off. The plains stretched before them like a wasteland, littered with broken machines and bones half buried in the sand. The baby stirred occasionally but remained mostly quiet, as if sensing the danger in the air. For hours they walked. John led the way, scanning constantly. His mind was alert, his heart heavy with responsibility. Every sound, the rustle of wind, the creak of metal, felt like a warning. By midday, dark clouds gathered above. Lightning flickered in the distance, followed by the growl of thunder. The storm was coming. Sierra's face grew pale. "Storms here are not kind. They carry poison rain." John's jaw tightened. He searched the horizon desperately. At last he spotted the jagged outline of an old transport station, half buried in sand. "There," he said, pointing. "We'll take shelter." The storm struck as they reached the station. Winds howled, carrying dust and ash that cut against their skin. John pushed open a rusted door, and they slipped inside just as the first drops of acidic rain hissed against the ground outside. Inside, the station was dark and broken. Old lights flickered weakly, and the air smelled of rust. They moved into the shadows, finding a corner away from the broken windows. For a moment, they could breathe. The baby whimpered softly, but Sierra pressed her cheek against the child, whispering until the cries softened. John sat against the wall, exhaustion catching up with him. He closed his eyes briefly, but then he heard it. Voices. His eyes snapped open. Through the shattered window, faint lights glowed in the storm. Shapes moved in the distance, figures armed, advancing toward the station. Raiders. Again. John's pulse quickened. He turned to Sierra. "They're here." Fear flashed across her face, but she held it back, clutching her baby close. "What do we do?" John scanned the station. The raiders would enter soon. Fighting them inside would trap them. Their only hope was escape, but the storm outside was deadly. He gritted his teeth. "We'll use the storm." Sierra's eyes widened. "The rain will burn." "We don't have a choice," John cut in. "If we stay, we die. If we run, we have a chance." He pulled a torn sheet of metal from the floor and handed it to her. "Hold this above you. It'll shield you and the baby. Stay close to me. Don't stop no matter what." Sierra's breath shook, but she nodded. Her voice was firm despite her fear. "I will not stop." The raiders' voices grew louder. Footsteps clanged against the station floor. They were inside now, John whispered. They burst from the shadows, pushing through a side exit. The storm roared around them, acid rain sizzling against the metal sheet above Sierra. John fired back blindly, the flash of his weapon lighting the darkness. Shouts echoed behind them. The wind howled like a beast, nearly knocking them off their feet. The ground was slippery with burning rain, but John forced his legs to move, pulling Sierra with him. Every drop that missed the shield stung his skin, leaving painful marks. Sierra's baby cried, the sound nearly lost in the storm. Sierra pressed her body closer, shielding her child as best she could. "Run!" she cried over the wind. "Don't stop." John's lungs burned, his shoulder screamed with pain, but he kept moving. Lightning flashed, revealing the riverbed ahead. If they reached it, they might lose the raiders in the storm. Behind them, the hunters gave chase. Their shouts were muffled by the storm, but their glowing eyes pierced the darkness. John pushed harder. The riverbed was close now, just a little farther, then his foot slipped. He stumbled hard, crashing into the mud. The rain bit into his exposed skin like fire. He growled, forcing himself up. Sierra was there beside him, her face streaked with rain and ash. She bent forward, pressing the metal shield tighter over the baby. Even without arms, she moved with desperate strength, shielding her child before herself. "Get up," she cried. "We are almost there." John rose, staggering forward. Together, they plunged into the riverbed, the storm thickening around them. The ground dipped, forming a shallow trench. The wind howled above, carrying the hunters' voices away. At last, the lights behind them faded. The raiders' shouts were swallowed by the storm. John collapsed against the muddy wall of the trench, gasping for breath. Sierra sank beside him, her body trembling but her eyes fierce. The baby whimpered but was safe, pressed tightly against her chest. For a long time they said nothing, only listening to the storm rage overhead. Finally, John spoke, his voice hoarse. "You were right. Storms are not kind." Sierra gave a weak laugh, her lips trembling. "But we are still alive." John looked at her, at the strength in her eyes despite everything. He nodded slowly. "Yes, we are." The storm continued above, but in the trench, for the first time in days, they felt hidden, protected. The great escape had cost them dearly, but it had also proven something. Together, they could survive anything. Resolution, the storm passed by morning. The sky was gray and heavy, but the poisonous rain had ended, leaving the world quiet again. In the shallow riverbed, John stirred awake, his muscles stiff, his shoulder burning with pain. Yet the first thing he saw brought him strength. Sierra sat nearby, her baby pressed against her chest, both wrapped in the torn cloth that John had helped tie. Despite exhaustion, despite her weakness, she was still awake, still guarding her child. When she saw John's eyes open, she gave a faint smile. "You did not leave," she whispered. John pushed himself upright with a groan. "I said I wouldn't." Sierra tilted her head, studying him. "Others promised before. All broke their word. You are different." He didn't reply, but deep inside he felt the truth of her words. For the first time in years, he wasn't wandering alone. He wasn't running from the past. He was running toward something. Someone. They climbed from the riverbed slowly, every step heavy. The land ahead was rough but more open, with hills that stretched toward the horizon. John knew human territory was still far but closer than it had ever been. By midday, they saw the first sign of hope. A tall signal tower, half-broken but unmistakably human. It rose from the hills like a finger pointing to the sky. Sierra gasped softly, her eyes wide. "Is that your people?" John nodded. "It means there's an outpost nearby. We're close." Her breath caught. She hugged her baby tighter. "Then maybe my daughter will live." But hope never came without danger. As they neared the tower, shadows appeared on the ridges, figures watching, moving. John's stomach tightened. Raiders again. Somehow they had tracked them. He grabbed Sierra's shoulder. "Run toward the tower." "Don't stop," her eyes filled with fear. "And you?" "I'll hold them back." "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "If you fall, I fall too. We run together." Before John could argue, the raiders attacked. They came fast, their weapons flashing in the fading light. John fired, dropping one then another, but more surged forward. The air filled with shouts and the clash of steel. Sierra moved as fast as she could, the baby pressed against her chest, her legs stumbling over rocks. She had no arms to fight, no shield to hold, yet her voice rang out through the chaos. "John!" she cried. "We are here. Do not leave us!" Her voice gave him strength. With a roar, John charged, striking down another raider with the butt of his weapon. But he was tiring. His shoulder bled again, his legs heavy. Then from the tower ahead, lights flared. Human voices shouted. Weapons cracked in the distance. The outpost had seen them. The raiders hesitated, snarling, but the humans' firepower forced them back. One by one, they retreated into the hills, their shadows swallowed by the dark. John staggered, nearly falling, but strong hands caught him. Human soldiers rushed forward, pulling him toward safety. Sierra collapsed beside him, clutching her baby, tears streaming down her face. For the first time, she saw not only survival, but rescue. Inside the outpost, medics treated John's wounds. Sierra sat nearby, watching nervously as the soldiers examined her. She expected scorn, rejection, maybe even violence. She had lived her life hearing she was worthless. But then something unexpected happened. The baby reached out, her tiny hand gripping the soldier's finger. The man softened, smiling. "Strong little one," he murmured. Another soldier brought food and water. They offered it to Sierra gently, without disgust. She froze, overwhelmed, before whispering, They do not hate me." John, bandaged and weak, looked at her. "I told you. You're safe here." Her eyes filled with tears. She turned to him, voice trembling. "Safe because of you. You gave us life," he shook his head. "No, you kept fighting even without arms. You carried her through everything. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known." Sierra bent her head, her voice breaking. "Then be my husband, not just in words, but in truth. Stand with me so they cannot take her from us." The room fell silent. John looked at her. This woman who had nothing, who had been cast aside by her people, yet who had given everything for her child. He thought of the nights they survived, the storm they endured, the raiders they faced. Slowly he reached out and placed his hand gently over hers, though she had no fingers to return the touch. His voice was steady. "I already am." Sierra's eyes widened. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but her lips curved into the softest, purest smile. The baby stirred in her sling, making a small sound as if blessing the moment. John sat back, exhausted but at peace. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of loneliness lift from his chest. He was no longer just a wanderer. He was a protector, a husband, a father. The journey had been brutal, filled with fear and loss. But now, in the safety of human walls, a new life waited. The alien woman who once whispered, "I have no arms, I cannot care for my daughter," now had something more powerful than arms. She had a man who chose her. She had hope, and together they had a family.